If your eyes flutter open between the hours of 3 and 5 in the morning, don't rush to close them. Don't smother that gentle awakening with groggy impatience. Sit still, breathe deep. For this hour, this sacred hour, is not a mistake. It is not a random fluke of sleep cycles. No, beloved, it is a call. The dawn is not a deadline. The dawn is a doorway. A soft, golden threshold between the world of dreams and the world of becoming. It does not knock with noise or flash with lights. It arrives in silence, offering something quiet but holy. It does not beg you to rise. It invites you to return. At this hour, the world is hushed. The sky is still learning to blush with morning. The roads are empty. The hum of daily life still sleeping. And yet, you are awake, not by accident, but by appointment. The soul knows things the mind cannot yet explain. It knows when it is time to listen. It knows when the veil between what is and what could be has thinned just enough to let truth slip through. Waking up at this hour is not always about restlessness. Sometimes it is readiness. Readiness not to work or to hustle or to check another task off the list. Readiness to remember, to realign, to be. Because the early morning is not about rushing to begin a new task. It is about pausing long enough to recognize the presence of something greater. In the quiet stillness, without the traffic of obligations and opinions, something deep within you is trying to rise like mist from the earth. The dawn is not loud, it is gentle, but do not confuse its gentleness for weakness. There is power in the hush, power in the moment before the world stirs. That is where truth sits, wrapped in silence, waiting for someone brave enough to meet it there. So if you find yourself awake while the stars still cling to the sky, do not sigh in frustration. Sit up, turn inward, light a candle, open a window, put your hand on your heart, ask yourself not what you have to do, but who you want to be, because that question has space in the morning that it cannot find in the noise of midday. There is no traffic in your mind yet. No emails, no voices, no errands pulling at the edges of your attention, just you. And that is enough. You are not meant to rush through life as though it were a checklist. You are not here only to rise and grind and fall back into bed weary but unchanged. You are here to awaken fully, deeply, wildly. An awakening does not begin with an alarm clock. It begins with an awareness. An awareness that your life is more than your schedule, more than your obligations, more than what you've been told is enough. The dawn whispers of possibilities still forming, paths not yet walked, words not yet spoken. And you, yes, you are being called to walk through that doorway. You may not feel ready. You may feel tired. You may not know what to do with yourself at that hour, hands heavy with uncertainty. But you don't have to do anything right away. You only have to be present, sit in the stillness, let the quiet touch your bone. Let the slowness unravel the tight places inside of you that have been stretched by fear and folded by pressure. There is healing in stillness, there is memory in silence, and there is direction in the moment between breaths. When you remember that you are not lost, only layered. The dawn doesn't demand you have a plan, it simply asks for your presence. To be here, to be awake, to be honest. Maybe you write, maybe you pray, maybe you just breathe and let your thoughts come and go like waves on a shore. The doing is not the point, the being is. The remembering is. The reconnecting with your core before the world starts asking you to be everything but yourself, that is the gift. And gifts, real ones, do not shout. They wait to be opened with reverence. So if your body stirs in the blue-black hours before day, trust that it is not without reason. Trust that something within you is rising with the sun, not just the muscles and bones, but the vision, the calling, the potential that has been quietly waiting for its moment to be remembered. The dawn is not a race, it is not a hustle, it is not a productivity hack, it is a homecoming, a return to the sacred space inside of you that knows, even if you've forgotten, why you are here, not just to exist, but to expand, to explore, to express, to evolve. Let your eyes adjust to the soft light. Let your spirit meet you before the world does. Let the dawn unfold you gently, slowly, wholly. Between the hours of 3 and 5 in the morning, the world is draped in stillness so thick it feels sacred. There is no crowd, no clamor, no chatter from the mouths of men trying to prove their worth. The streets are quiet, the screens are off. The noise that normally fills every crevice of your life is hushed, tucked away in sleep. And in that hush, something ancient stirs, something soft but undeniable. That stirring is your soul, and that hour, that early, unpolished hour, is the time it finally gets to speak. The soul does not shout over chaos. It does not interrupt schedules or scream above distractions. It waits for silence, for softness, for surrender. And when the world is finally quiet, when no one is watching, when there is nothing left to perform, the soul rises. It rises like smoke from still embers, rising not to entertain, but to reveal. It is in these hours that the soul whispers its truths, not the loud, shiny truths that look good on paper, but the aching, honest ones. The truths that tell you where you've hidden your voice, where you've settled for safety, where you've forgotten your own power. This time of mourning is not an accident. It is a design so divine it bypasses your logic and knocks gently on your spirit. There is something sacred about being awake while everything else sleeps, not because you are busy, but because you are available. Available to hear what cannot be spoken in the daytime, available to listen to the deeper parts of you that have grown weary from being ignored. Available to feel without distraction or delay what it is you truly want, truly fear, truly carry. When the soul stirs, it does not come with answers. It comes with questions. Questions that sit with you in the quiet like trusted elders, not demanding decisions, but inviting reflection. What have you abandoned to survive? What have you sacrificed to belong? What part of you have you muted to make others comfortable? These are not questions for the midday mind. They are questions for the sacred self. And they do not require immediate solutions. They require space. And the early morning gives you that space in abundance. In this space, your spirit becomes visible again, not the version of you that nods and smiles and nods again, not the version of you that responds to every email, pays every bill, answers every call, all while silencing your own name. No, in this hour, you return to the version of you that was untouched by expectation, the version of you that existed before the world told you what success should look like, what love should feel like, what dreams should sound like. You return to the self that was whole before it was told to be small. And in that return, you find something powerful, presence. The ability to sit with yourself without needing to fix, perform, or flee. You meet your own eyes in the mirror of silence and remember that you are not a machine, you are not a task, you are not a brand, you are a being, a human being with layers and longing and light. And sometimes it takes the dark silence of the early hours to truly see that light. This is not about routines or rituals or morning mantras, though those have their place. This is about the spiritual clarity that comes when everything else is asleep. When you're not trying to impress anyone, not trying to escape anything, just sitting with the rawness of your own breath. Inhale, exhale. That is your soul speaking, saying, I'm still here, saying, I've been waiting, saying, come back to me. When the soul stirs in those quiet hours, it is not asking you to prove yourself. It is asking you to know yourself, to know the rhythm of your breath, the beat of your heart, the truth of your pain. It's asking you to stop long enough to recognize that you are not lost. You are layered. And the layers peel back more easily when the world is not watching. That's why the early hours are so powerful. There is no audience, no performance. Only truth, only presence, only you. And there in that soft, slow silence, you begin to remember things you had forgotten. Dreams you once held like fire in your belly. Ideas that came to you in the night but were silenced by the daylight. Visions that don't fit into spreadsheets or status updates but still matter deeply. The soul does not operate on deadlines. It does not clock in or out. It does not care how many followers you have or what title sits beside your name. The soul simply asks, are you listening? Are you here? To wake between 3 and 5 is to be handed a moment of divine intimacy, A moment where the eternal meets the everyday, where the infinite presses its palm against your chest and asks you to feel, to pause, to remember. You don't need to know what comes next. You only need to be still long enough to hear yourself. Because in that quiet space before sunrise, the soul is not sleeping. It is stirring. It is reaching. It is ready. There are nights when sleep escapes you, and not because of the hum of the world or the worries in your wallet, but because something deeper is pressing against your ribs, knocking at the door of your chest, refusing to let you rest. Between the hours of 3 and 5 in the morning, there is a pain that is not physical, but it pulses like thunder in your spirit. It is not a punishment. It is not random. It is not meant to break you down. It is meant to break you open. That pain, that ache, that sudden waking is a call, not to suffering, but to shaping. What you think is unrest is actually revelation. What you feel as discomfort is your potential pressing forward, demanding breath, demanding birth. Pain does not always come to wound. Sometimes it comes to wake. There are pieces of you that have been silent for too long, corners of your soul that you've closed off to survive the day. And in the quiet of early morning, when the world is still asleep, those pieces rise. They rise like tides, slow, steady, impossible to ignore. The pain that nudges you from your slumber is not here to torment you. It is here to remind you. There is a truth within you that has outgrown its hiding place, a dream too big to keep pretending it doesn't matter. A voice that's been silenced by fear but is now cracking through the surface of your safety. You were not born to numb your pain, you were born to listen to it, because pain, when you sit with it, becomes prophecy. It shows you what still needs healing. It reveals what still needs attention. It points to what still needs to be released. And if you have the courage to sit with it without fleeing, without fixing, without pretending, you will hear it speak. It does not speak in riddles. It speaks in memory. It speaks in longing. It speaks in the language of things you've buried just to keep going. The relationship you stayed in too long, the job that pays you but starves your joy, the gift you shelved for the sake of being realistic. Pain knows all your hiding places, and it is not here to shame you. It is here to free you. Waking between 3 and 5 a.m. is often the hour of the soul's most honest conversation. When everything else is quiet, your truth gets loud. You may feel restless, you may feel overwhelmed, you may feel as if something is trying to break you, but nothing is breaking you. What is happening is a cracking open. Your heart, your spirit, your awareness, all stretching to make room for what's next. This is the labor before the birth of a deeper self. Labor is painful, but it is purposeful. And what's being born in you isn't weak or unfinished. It is powerful, necessary, and divine. We are taught to avoid pain, to medicate it, to bury it, to run. But pain that wakes you before dawn has no interest in being silenced. It will follow you into your daylight. It will whisper through your laughter. It will sit beside you in your busyness, reminding you that you cannot grow if you will not feel. So when it comes, let it rise, let it ache. Let it show you where your soul has been stifled and where your truth has been waiting. You don't have to understand it all in that moment. You don't have to fix everything you feel, but you do have to listen. Because inside that pain is a path. Not all pain is trauma. Not all discomfort is destruction. Some pain is instruction. It is a signal, a sacred stirring. It says you're not where you belong. It says there's more for you. It says this life you've built is too small for the magnitude of who you really are. And that kind of pain doesn't go away with distractions or sleep. It stays. It presses. It pulls. Not to punish, but to prepare. You are being prepared for something larger than your current comfort, something deeper than your current understanding. You may cry in those hours. You may sit still and feel the weight of everything you've been carrying. You may not have words. You may not have answers. That's all right. The soul does not require clarity to begin healing. It requires presence. It requires honesty. And when you stop trying to quiet the pain, when you stop labeling it as weakness, you begin to see it for what it truly is. A teacher, a divine, tender, relentless teacher that only visits the brave. Because it takes courage to feel. It takes strength to stay awake when everything in you wants to sleepwalk back into denial. This kind of awakening will not come with fanfare. It won't announce itself with trumpets. It will come with a whisper at 3:47 a.m. or a sudden jolt at 4:12, and it will sit with you in the dark, not to haunt you, but to hold you until you, not just from your bed, but from your smallness, from your silence, from your pretending. Pain is not your enemy. It is the midwife of your transformation. It shows up not to hurt you, but to remind you of what still needs to be born. In the early hours, while the moon is still cradling the earth and the stars haven't yet handed the sky back to the sun, there are people who rise, not because their calendars tell them to, not because the world is watching, but because something inside them moves, a quiet knowing, a subtle shift in the soul, a rhythm deeper than sleep itself begins to stir. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't seek an audience. These early risers, they are not chasing attention. They are meeting destiny in the stillness, wrapped in shadows and silence. What they do in that hour is not glamorous. It is not often seen or celebrated. But oh, how sacred it is, because they are not just rising, they are receiving. Discipline is often misunderstood. People think it is about control, about restriction, about saying no to everything you love. But true discipline is not punishment, it is devotion. It is not built from fear, it is rooted in love. Love for a future that hasn't yet arrived but is already asking for preparation. Love for a self that is becoming, even when the process is unclear. Discipline doesn't always feel good. It doesn't always feel like fire. Sometimes it feels like sitting in the dark, doing the work with no guarantee, no audience, no outcome in sight. But it is in those unseen early moments that destiny begins to take shape. There are those who pray in the dark, whispering truths to the heavens before the day has laid claim to their time. There are those who stretch their limbs in silence, connecting with the breath that carried them through the night. There are those who write, their pens etching thoughts that only the quiet can coax out. And there are those who simply sit in the raw stillness of the morning and listen to the breath, to the heartbeat, to the inner compass that gets drowned out by the roar of the day. These are acts of discipline. Simple, silent, sacred. Discipline is the willingness to show up before the world tells you who to be. It's not just about waking early. It's about being willing to meet yourself before the rest of the world gets a say. It's about carving out time for the truth of your purpose, your pain, your power. And there's something about the early morning that makes space for truth like no other time can. It asks nothing of you except your presence. No makeup, no mask, no performance, just you and the rhythm of your own becoming. It's easy to move when the world is watching, easy to show up when there's praise waiting. But who are you when no one sees you? Who are you when the room is empty and the applause is gone? That is the measure of discipline, not what you do when it's convenient, but what you commit to when it's quiet, when it's uncomfortable, when it's lonely. The early hours are often lonely, not in the aching, empty kind of way, but in the refining, holy kind of way. It's in that loneliness that your integrity is tested. It's in that silence that your intentions are purified. There's no shortcut to purpose, no elevator to greatness. There's just the stairwell, one quiet step at a time, often lit only by the flicker of your own faith. You won't always feel inspired. You won't always feel ready. But discipline doesn't wait for inspiration. It moves anyway. It moves because something within you refuses to stay stagnant. It moves because potential unexpressed becomes pain, and pain, when met with discipline, becomes power. The world may never see those early morning hours. It may never witness the prayers you whispered, the tears you let fall, the journal pages you filled, the small habits you honored, but the fruit of that discipline will speak. In your strength, in your clarity, in your peace, in the way you walk into a room carrying a presence that was built in private. What you build before sunrise will show itself in how you move through the day, not with noise, but with knowing, not with arrogance, but with assurance. You will not need to prove yourself because the work has already been done in the silence. Discipline is the midwife of destiny. It brings forth what is already within you, not with force, but with faithfulness. It holds your hand through the dark and reminds you that you are capable of more than comfort. It whispers, you are not your distractions, and it proves it by what you choose again and again in the quiet, in the cold, in the dark. You become what you repeat. You become what you return to. So return to the morning, return to the silence, return to the work, return to the breath that reminds you you are still here, and that is enough to begin again. There is a time in the quiet folds of the morning, somewhere between 3 and 5, when the veil between the ordinary and the divine thins. The stillness is not just silence, it is sanctuary. The breath of the world has not yet quickened. The demands of the day have not yet begun to shout, and in that hush, the imagination walks unguarded. It is in those sacred hours that creativity rises from the depth of the soul like incense from a prayer. It does not come with thunder, no bright signs or blaring horns, but with a gentle pulse, a whisper, a hum beneath your ribs saying, there is more in you. The mind in the early morning is not cluttered with conversation or calculation. It is wide and open, fresh like dew before the sun touches it. That is the moment where thoughts are not yet dressed in logic or filtered through fear. Ideas come raw and wild, like birds that have flown miles just to perch on your shoulder for a minute. And if you are still enough, quiet enough, willing enough, they will stay, they will sing, they will tell you stories you had forgotten you were carrying. These stories, your poems, your paintings, your plans, your purpose, have been waiting in the wings of your spirit for space to land. Imagination is not just the realm of artists and dreamers. It belongs to all of us. It is the language of the soul. It is how the divine speaks through your uniqueness. And in the early morning, when the rest of the world is still wrapped in slumber, your imagination walks freely, unjudged and unbound. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to make money. It doesn't have to fit into a neat little box. It only has to move, to breathe, to speak its truth. And your only job is to listen, to follow it like a child follows a stream, not to where it's going, but to what it feels like. Some of the most powerful ideas don't arrive during busy hours. They arrive when the heart is still tender, when the defenses are down, when the ego has stepped aside. You might wake with a sentence in your head or an image or a tune or a feeling that demands shape. That is the moment to honor it. That is the hour to hold it. Creativity does not always repeat herself. If you turn her away too many times, she finds another heart to visit. That is why you must be ready. Ready with a pen, ready with an open heart, ready with the courage to create without understanding. Ready to make something not because it is perfect, but because it is alive. These early hours are the canvas. The colors have not yet been chosen for you. The opinions of others have not yet stained your vision. There is no should, no must, no have to, just possibility. It is not the kind of creativity that demands applause. It is the kind that simply needs to exist. A word written in a journal, a melody hummed into the still air, a vision sketched in the margins of a notebook. These things may never be seen by anyone else, but they are sacred just the same, because they remind you of who you are. They remind you that you are not a machine built to repeat, but a being meant to create.